Have you ever felt that nagging frustration, when you set out to make a really significant change in your life? Maybe it's a new fitness routine or mastering a skill or even just like finally getting your home organized, only to find those big ambitious goals just kind of quietly slip through your fingers.
Oh, absolutely. It's a common story, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. We often aim for these like monumental transformations, but then we realize that lasting change feels incredibly elusive. And you kind of wonder, why do some people seem to effortlessly build good habits while, the rest of us feel like we're constantly struggling upstream?
That feeling is so relatable. I think everyone experiences that. But what if the secret isn't about these massive overnight overhauls at all? What if it's about something, well, far smaller, something more fundamental?
Smaller. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Today we're diving deep into this concept of atomic habits. It's a surprisingly effective approach, really, that suggests profound, lasting change comes from focusing on the tiniest, most seemingly insignificant shifts.
Atomic habits. So atomic-like,
Right.
super small.
Exactly. Think of it as an extremely small amount, the single irreducible unit of a larger system. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack the fundamental principles behind building these powerful, lasting habits by focusing on these tiny changes. We want to give you a clear, actionable understanding of how they actually work.
Okay.
And we'll explore the author's own remarkable journey and dive into some of the fascinating science behind these concepts too.
All right, let's unpack this. So our journey into atomic habits really starts with the author himself, James Clear, and this life-altering incident that completely shifted his perspective.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
It is. On the final day of his sophomore year of high school, James was playing baseball, a sport he absolutely loved, and a teammate's bat slipped during a full swing and struck him right in the face, like between the eyes.
Oh, wow.
He says he has no memory of the impact itself, but the force must have been immense. It crushed his nose into this distorted U-shape, sent the soft tissue of his brain slamming into the inside of his skull, caused immediate widespread swelling.
It's just horrific.
In a fraction of a second, broken nose, multiple skull fractures, 2 shattered eye sockets. He even slipped into a coma.
It's a truly harrowing account, and it really adds this profound context to his later work on resilience and habits. And his family, unfortunately, they were kind of no strangers to hospitals.
Right, I read about that. His sister.
Yeah, when he was just 5, his younger sister was diagnosed with leukemia at age 3. They spent 2.5 really difficult years with her going through chemo, spinal taps, bone marrow biopsies, just awful stuff.
God.
Thankfully, she recovered fully, but then 10 years later, there his parents were, back in that same terrifying place, but with a different child.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine.
Absolutely. And his return to baseball, which had been such a huge part of his life, his dad played minor leaguer for the Cardinals, and James himself dreamed of playing professionally well. That return was incredibly challenging.
I bet after months of rehab.
Yeah. After months of rehab, what he wanted more than anything was just to get back on the field. But when the season rolled around, he was the only junior cut from the varsity team, sent down to play with the sophomores on JV.
Ouch. That must have stung.
For someone who'd put so much time and effort in, it was humiliating. He remembers sitting in his car, crying, just desperately trying to find a song to make him feel better. A real low point.
But, and this is key, this isn't where his story ends. It's actually where these subtle, small shifts really begin to prove their power. After a year of self-doubt, but also consistent incremental effort, he managed to make the varsity team as a senior.
Okay, so progress.
And then, and this is kind of defying what seemed like insurmountable odds, right?
Right.
After being hit by a bat, coma, all of it, he was selected as the top male athlete at Denison University and named to the prestigious ESPN Academic All-America team.
Wow, that's huge. Only 33 players nationwide.
Exactly, just 33 players. And by the time he graduated, he was listed in the school record books in 8 different categories. And that same year, he got the university's highest academic honor, the President's Medal.
That's an incredible turnaround. It really speaks directly to the core of his philosophy, doesn't it? This personal triumph. It wasn't just an isolated event. His professional success kind of mirrored it.
Yeah, you see the pattern.
By 2015, his email newsletter had grown to 200,000 subscribers, one of the fastest growing online. By 2018, nearly double that, 500,000. He signed a major book deal, launched the Habits Academy, which I read has now graduated over 10,000 leaders, managers, coaches, teachers.
Impressive reach.
And his articles in places like Time, Entrepreneur, Forbes, they were read by over 8 million people in 2016 alone. It really makes you think of that quote by Naval Ravikant. To write a great book, you must first become the book.
That fits perfectly.
James Clear truly embodies this. He relied on these small, consistent habits to rebound from injury, get stronger, perform at a high level, become a writer, build a business, basically grow up. His life is this living testament to the power of tiny shifts, lived through deep personal experience.
And this brings us right to a foundational concept in his work, this idea of the aggregation of marginal gains. And its, well, frankly, astounding mathematical implications.
Right, the British cycling story.
Exactly. Consider the British cycling team. For nearly 100 years, they were, let's be honest, the epitome of mediocrity in their sport.
Yeah, pretty bad. One Olympic gold since 1908. No Tour de France wins in 110 years.
Dismal. Their performance was so underwhelming that one of Europe's top bike manufacturers actually refused to sell bikes to them. They openly feared it would hurt their sales if other pros saw the Brits using their gear.
Wow, that's rough. So how did they possibly turn that around?
Well, that's where Dave Brailsford comes in. He was their new performance director, and he introduced this philosophy of the aggregation of marginal gains. Basically, a relentless commitment to searching for a tiny, just 1% improvement in everything they did.
1% in everything.
Everything. He famously said, the whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improve it by 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together. It wasn't about one big magic bullet, but thousands of tiny ones.
It sounds almost too simple, though. Just 1%. Did they just fix the obvious stuff, or did he really dig into the weeds?
Oh, he went deep. They started with the obvious, sure, redesigning bike seats for comfort, improving tire grip. But then they looked everywhere else, redesigning team uniforms lighter, more aerodynamic, using specific massage gels for faster recovery. They even brought in surgeons to teach the riders the absolute best way to wash their hands to cut down on illness.
Hand washing. Seriously.
Seriously. They brought their own pillows and mattresses to hotels for optimal sleep. They even painted the inside of the team truck white.
White? Why white?
To make it easier to spot little bits of dust, which could affect the finely tuned bikes. They were looking for edges, however small, wherever they could possibly find them.
That is incredible attention to detail. Okay, so what happened? What was the outcome of all these tiny 1% tweaks?
The results were, frankly, astonishing. Within just 5 years, British cycling completely dominated the sport. They won 60% of the gold medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Then they went on to win the Tour de France and repeated that 5 times in 6 years.
From zero to hero, basically.
Pretty much. And the math illustrates this power beautifully. Getting just 1% better each day for 1 year makes you 37 times better by the end of that year.
37 times.
Yeah. But conversely, getting 1% worse each day for a year means you declined almost to zero. What starts as a small win or a minor setback, it compounds into something vastly more profound. It really is the difference between flying and crashing.
That mathematical compounding is just mind-blowing. It really puts into perspective how something that seems totally insignificant right now can lead you to a vastly different destination over a lifetime. Success isn't about these one-time dramatic transformations.
No, it's a product of your daily habits. What matters far more than your current results, really, is your current trajectory.
Yeah.
Your outcomes. They're lagging measures of your habits.
That's a great way to put it. Your net worth is a lagging measure of financial habits. Weight from eating habits, knowledge from learning habits, clutter from cleaning habits. You really do get what you repeat.
Exactly. Think about it this way. You could have a millionaire who spends more than they earn each month. They're on a bad trajectory, right?
Right.
If their spending habits don't change, that wealth will eventually disappear. But conversely, someone who's currently broke but manages to save just a little bit every month, they're on a trajectory toward financial freedom, even if they feel like they're moving slowly. Time magnifies the margin between success and failure. Your daily choices, saving a bit, going to the gym, reading something new, they compound over 10, 20 years to define who you become.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky for a lot of people, myself included sometimes. We hit this wall, right? When trying to build habits and then just quit. Is there a scientific reason for that frustration? What's going on with this, what does he call it? The plateau of latent potential.
Yes, the plateau of latent potential.
Ah.
This concept explains why progress often isn't linear, which is what trips us up. Imagine an ice cube sitting on a table in a cold room, say 25 degrees.
Okay.
Slowly, the room heats up, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31 degrees. The ice cube is still there. No visible change.
Right, nothing's happening.
But all that work, all that gradual heating, it is doing something. It's being stored.
Hmm.
And then suddenly at 32 degrees, bang, all the action happens. The
Yeah.
ice cube melts.
Ah, okay. I see the analogy.
And this perfectly illustrates what the author calls the valley of disappointment. We expect progress to be this straight line upwards. And it's incredibly frustrating when our changes seem totally ineffective for weeks, maybe even months. You think, I've been running every day for a month. Why don't I see any change in my body?
Yeah, that feeling is real.
That frustration can easily lead to good habits just falling by the wayside. But the real insight here isn't just that progress is nonlinear. It's that persistence in that valley of disappointment is the work. It's the invisible force building up towards that eventual breakthrough. Habits need to persist long enough to break through this plateau to make a meaningful difference.
So if you're struggling to build a good habit or break a bad one, it might not be because you lack ability or effort. It could just be that you haven't crossed that plateau of latent potential yet. Complaining about not seeing success despite hard work, it's kind of like complaining about the ice cube not melting between 25 and 31 degrees.
Precisely. Your work isn't wasted, it's just being stored. All the action happens at 32 degrees. And when you finally do break through, people on the outside might suddenly call it an overnight success, completely missing all the unseen, often unglamorous effort that led to that moment.
Right, they only see the earthquake, not the years of pressure building up underneath.
Exactly like that. It's like the geological pressure of tectonic plates building for years before an earthquake finally releases all that stored energy. The visible jump is only possible because of the invisible, persistent work that came before. It's a really powerful reminder. The sustained effort, even when the results aren't immediately obvious, is foundational to any profound change.
Okay, so this focus on persistence and the long game makes sense. Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about goals versus systems. Conventional wisdom screams set goals.
Right.
Specific, actionable goals. Lose 20 pounds, make $1 million, whatever. But the sources here challenge that pretty strongly, don't they? They introduce the power of systems as the real driver.
They do. And the distinction is absolutely crucial. Goals are about the results you want to achieve, winning the championship, building that $1 million business, playing a new piece of music perfectly. Systems, though, are about the processes that lead to those results.
Okay, so the how, not just the what.
Exactly. For a coach, the system is how they recruit players, manage assistants, conduct practice. For an entrepreneur, it's how they test ideas, hire people, run marketing campaigns. For a musician, it's how often they practice, how they break down tricky parts, their method for getting feedback.
And what are the problems with being purely goals-focused, which so many of us are taught to be?
Well, there are a few key issues. First, winners and losers often have the exact same goals. Every team wants to win the championship, right? But only one does. The goal itself doesn't differentiate them. What likely does is their system.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, achieving a goal is often just a momentary change. Think about a messy room. You set a goal, clean the room, you summon the energy, tidy up, and great, you have a clean room for now.
For now, yeah. Until it gets messy again.
Exactly. If you keep the same sloppy habits that led to the mess in the first place, you'll soon be looking at another messy room. You're just left chasing the same outcome because you never actually changed the system behind it. You treated a symptom, not the underlying cause. We think we need to change our results, but the results aren't really the problem. What we really need to change are the systems that cause those results. Fix the inputs, and the outputs tend to fix themselves.
Right, so it's not about the destination. It's more about building a reliable vehicle, a process that consistently moves you in the right direction.
That's a great way to put it. And the third problem with a goals-first mindset is that it can actually restrict your happiness. The implicit assumption behind any goal is often, once I reach my goal, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, delaying happiness.
Exactly. It puts happiness off until the next milestone, and it creates this kind of either-or conflict. Either you achieve your goal and you're a success, or you fail and you're a disappointment. It mentally boxes you into this very narrow version of happiness.
Whereas a systems-first approach.
A systems-first mentality is the antidote. When you fall in love with the process rather than just the product, you don't have to wait to give yourself permission to be happy. You can find satisfaction anytime your system is running. And a system can be successful in many different forms, not just the one specific outcome you first envisioned.
This systems-first idea flows really naturally into the concept of identity-based habits. This feels like the deepest level of behavior change. The author talks about 3 layers, right? Outcome change, what you get, process change, what you do, and identity change, what you believe about yourself.
That's right. And here's the picker, as you said. The most effective way to change your habits isn't just focusing on what you want to achieve, but on who you wish to become.
Who you wish to become, that feels bigger.
It is. It's a profound shift. Every action you take is literally like casting a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Your identity doesn't just precede your habits. In many ways, it emerges out of them. It's this continuous feedback loop.
So actions shape identity, and identity shapes actions.
Exactly. And the more pride you have in a particular aspect of your identity, the more motivated you'll be to maintain the habits associated with it. Think about it. If you're proud of how your hair looks, you'll develop all sorts of habits to care for it, right? If you're proud of your biceps, you'll make sure you never skip that upper body workout. Once your pride gets involved, you'll fight tooth and nail to maintain those habits because they're tied directly to your self-image. True, lasting behavior change is identity change.
Acting yourself into a new identity, that's powerful. And speaking of how behavior changes, let's get into the science a bit. How do habits actually work? Let's talk about that four-step habit loop.
Okay, so our brains are incredibly efficient, always trying to preserve conscious attention for the most essential tasks. Whenever possible, the conscious mind likes to pawn off repetitive tasks to the non-conscious mind to do automatically.
Right, frees up brain power.
Precisely. And that's exactly what happens when a habit is formed. Habits reduce cognitive load, free up mental capacity, so you can allocate your attention to other, maybe more complex problems.
And this process, it follows a pattern.
Yes, it can be broken down into 4 simple steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. This 4-step pattern is the backbone of every single habit. Your brain runs through these steps in the same order each time, forming this endless feedback loop that's running every moment you're alive. And often, the whole process is completed in just a split second.
Okay, let's break those down. First step, the cue. What is that exactly?
The cue is the trigger. It tells your brain to initiate a behavior. It's a bit of information that predicts a reward is coming. Our prehistoric ancestors paid attention to cues that signaled primary rewards like food, water, safety. Today, we learn cues that predict secondary rewards, things like money, fame, status, praise, approval, love, friendship, or even just a sense of personal satisfaction. Your mind is constantly scanning your internal and external environment, looking for these cues.
Okay, trigger identified, then comes the craving.
The craving is the motivational force behind every habit. Without some level of motivation or desire, without craving a change, we have no reason to act. What you crave isn't the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. You don't crave smoking a cigarette, you crave the feeling of relief it provides. You don't crave turning on the television, you crave feeling entertained. Every craving is linked to a desire to change your internal state.
Got it. Motivational force. Next up is the response.
The response is the actual habit you perform, which can take the form of a thought or an action. Whether a response occurs depends on how motivated you are and also how much friction is associated with the behavior. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you're willing to expend, well, you won't do it. Your response also depends on your ability. It sounds obvious, but a habit can only occur if you are capable of doing it. You can't dunk a basketball if you can't jump high enough.
Makes sense. Effort, motivation, ability. And finally, the reward.
Right, the reward is the end goal of every habit. Rewards serve 2 crucial purposes. First, they satisfy your craving. They deliver contentment, relief, whatever the craving was seeking. Food delivers energy. A promotion brings money and respect. Second, and this is critical, rewards teach us which actions are worth remembering in the future. Right. Your brain is a reward detector. It learns, hey, that felt good, let's do that again next time. So the habit loop cue, craving, response, reward, is continually scanning, predicting, trying things out, and learning from the results. It's a constant, rapid learning machine.
And you can think of it in 2 phases, right? The problem phase, cue and craving, realizing something needs to change, and the solution phase, response and reward, taking action and getting the payoff. What's really fascinating is how much of this happens without us even realizing it, non-consciously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't need to be consciously aware of the cue for a habit to begin. Your body has all these internal feedback loops. You can notice you're hungry without seeing a cookie on the counter. Cravings can arise from these internal signals, suddenly making you feel hungry even if you're not entirely sure what tipped you off.
And this non-conscious nature is what makes habits so useful, freeing up our minds, but also potentially dangerous, right?
Exactly. As habits form, your actions come under the direction of your automatic, non-conscious mind. You can fall into old patterns before you even realize what's happening. Like that example of the former lifeguard who might occasionally yell, "walk," at a running child decades after leaving the job, just because the environmental cues are still so deeply internalized.
Or Patty Alwell, the therapist you mentioned, who craved a cigarette for the first time in years the moment she hopped back on a horse, simply because that specific context had been linked to smoking for her for so long.
Precisely. Which brings us back to that great quote from Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. It really highlights the profound importance of awareness if you want to gain control over your behavior.
Okay, so awareness is key. And that brings us neatly to the starting point for developing that awareness, the habit scorecard. Tell us about that.
Its purpose is really simple.
Yeah.
Just write down your current habits to become truly aware of them, especially those non-conscious ones that you might not even realize you have. It's about making the invisible visible.
Kind of like that Japanese railway system example, pointing and calling.
Exactly like that. It's regarded as one of the best in the world for safety, partly because of this ritual. Conductors point at signals and call out commands aloud. Signal is green. Point at the speedometer. Speed is 75. They use multiple senses: eyes, hands, mouth, ears, which makes them much more likely to notice problems before something goes wrong. It even saved a woman and child on a bullet train once because the conductor noticed her arm caught in the door just before departure, something they might have missed without that explicit pointing and calling.
That's a fantastic system. So how do we apply that kind of heightened awareness to our own habits?
Well, the author mentions his wife doing something similar when packing for a trip. She verbally calls out essential items. I've got my keys, got my wallet, got my glasses, got my husband. It makes those automatic behaviors more conscious. And you can apply this to bad habits too. If you're trying to cut back on junk food and you catch yourself reaching for a cookie, try saying it aloud. I'm about to eat this cookie, but I don't need it. Eating it will cause me to gain weight and hurt my health. Hearing your bad habits spoken aloud can make the consequences seem more real. It adds weight to the action rather than letting you just mindlessly slip into an old routine. The whole process of behavior change really has to start with this kind of awareness.
Okay, so once we have that awareness, we can start applying the 4 laws of behavior change. Let's start with the first law. Make it obvious. How do we do that? One way is using implementation intentions, right?
Yes. This involves stating your intention for a habit in a very specific way. The formula is, I will behavior at time and location. So not just, I'll meditate more, but I will meditate for 1 minute at 7 a.m. in my kitchen. Or, I will study Spanish for 20 minutes at 6 p.m. in my bedroom.
That specificity seems key. Why does that help so much?
Because being specific about what you want and how you'll achieve it helps you say no to all the other things that inevitably try to derail your progress. When your dreams are vague, it's really easy to rationalize little exceptions all day long and never get started. But if your habit has a clear time and place, then with enough repetition, you essentially program yourself. You might even find yourself getting an urge to do the right thing at the right time without even consciously thinking about it, because your brain has learned that specific trigger.
Okay, so we've made the cue obvious with the intention, but how do we smoothly connect that cue to the new habit we want to build? That's where habit stacking comes in, which I found really clever.
It is clever. The formula is, after current habit, I will new habit. This leverages habits that are already rock solid in your routine to trigger the new ones. It's effective because human behavior often follows this chain reaction. One action naturally leads to the next. You finish one task, and it becomes the cue for the next.
Like the Diderot effect he mentions. Buying a new dress leads to wanting new shoes, then earrings.
Exactly. Obtaining a new possession often creates this spiral of consumption. Habit stacking uses that natural tendency. To apply it effectively, first, brainstorm a list of your current daily habits. Things you do without fail: getting out of bed, taking a shower, brewing coffee, brushing your teeth. These are your potential anchors.
And then you attach the new habit onto one of those anchors.
Right. But be specific about the cue. Instead of something vague like after work, make it after I close the door to my office for the day, or after my head hits the pillow, not just before bed. That specificity helps tightly bind your new habit to a concrete, immediate cue, dramatically increasing the odds you'll notice when it's time to act.
Got it. Specificity again. Okay, still under make it obvious, let's talk about environment design. This is all about making the cues for your desired habits visible and easy to access, right? Like product placement in a store.
Precisely. Think about it. Products at eye level. Stuff on the end caps in supermarkets, they get purchased more often. Hawkins Stern called this suggestion impulse buying. It's not an accident. Companies understand that the most obvious option is often the one that's taken.
And vision plays a huge role here.
Absolutely huge. Vision is arguably our most powerful sensory ability. Maybe half of our brain's resources are dedicated to vision. So, making cues visually obvious is incredibly effective. Remember that Schiphol Airport example?
The fly in the urinal, yeah.
Yeah, they put a tiny sticker that looked like a fly near the drain in each urinal. Apparently, men instinctively aimed for the perceived bug. This simple visual cue significantly improved aim and reduced cleaning costs by 8% per year. Subtle but powerful environmental design.
That's hilarious and brilliant. So
Yeah.
practically, how do we apply this if you want to remember your medication?
Put the bottle right next to the faucet where you'll definitely see it when you get water. Want to practice guitar more? Don't hide it in the closet. Put the guitar stand right in the middle of the living room. Want to write more thank you notes? Keep stationery, stamps, pens right on top of your desk. Want to drink more water? Fill up a few water bottles each morning and place them in common locations around the house. You essentially become the architect of your life, consciously altering your spaces to increase exposure to positive cues and reduce exposure to negative ones.
Being the architect of your life, I like that. And this ties into the idea that context is the cue, doesn't it? Habits get linked to the whole environment.
They absolutely do. It's rarely just one single trigger. It's the entire context. Think about those insomniacs who were told to only get into bed when they were truly tired. Over time, they began to associate the context of their bed only with the action of sleeping, not browsing phones or watching TV or worrying. Their brain learned that sleeping was the primary action that happened in that room, making it easier to fall asleep quickly.
Which suggests a powerful strategy. Changing habits might actually be easier in a new environment.
It often is. A new environment helps you escape the subtle triggers and cues that nudge you toward your old, unwanted habits. Try establishing a new routine in a new coffee shop or on a park bench you don't usually visit, or even just a rarely used corner of your room. It's often easier to associate a new habit with a completely fresh context than it is to battle the old, ingrained cues in the same environment where those habits were formed.
And if you can't just pack up and move,
Then you redefine or rearrange your current environment. Adopt that mantra, one space, one use. The author talks about how, when he started his entrepreneurial career, he worked from his couch or the kitchen table. It made it really hard to switch off work in the evenings because there was no clear boundary.
yeah, the context was mixed.
Right. But when he could finally afford a separate office, suddenly work happened in here and personal life happened out there. That clear spatial division made it much easier to switch off his professional brain and signal the end of the workday.
So avoid mixing contexts whenever possible. If your phone is for work and social media and games, it becomes this jumbled mess of conflicting cues. You pick it up intending to be productive, but you're also conditioned to check Instagram or email just because you open the device.
Exactly. For stable, predictable behavior, you generally need an environment that is also stable and predictable. A stable environment where everything has its place and purpose allows your habits to form more easily without interference. Relaxation is easier in a space designed solely for that purpose. Focus comes more readily at your work desk. Sleep comes quickly when it's the only thing that happens in your bedroom.
Okay, that covers making it obvious. Now let's move to the second law. Make it attractive. We've got the cue sorted. But how do we make ourselves genuinely want to do the new behavior? One strategy I loved was temptation bundling.
Ah, yes, the Netflix bike hack.
Exactly. Ronan Byrne, that engineering student who loved Netflix but knew he should exercise more, he hacked a stationary bike so it would only play Netflix if he was cycling at a certain speed. Slow down, the show pauses.
It really is brilliant in its simplicity. Eliminating obesity one Netflix binge at a time. As one fan put it, the formula for temptation bundling is basically, after current habit, I will habit I need. After habit I need, I will habit I want.
Can you give another example?
Sure, maybe you need to practice gratitude, but want to read the news. After I get my morning coffee, current habit, I will say one thing I'm grateful for, habit I need. After I say one thing I'm grateful for, need, I will read the news, habit I want. Or maybe you need to make sales calls but want to check sports scores. After I get back from my lunch break, current habit, I will call 3 potential clients, need. After I call 3 potential clients, need, I will check ESPN, want. It works by linking something you need to do with something you're already motivated to do, making the necessary habit more attractive.
That makes sense. It piggybacks on existing desire. This also connects to how our desires can be influenced by what the book calls supernormal stimuli. These exaggerated versions of reality designed to grab our attention and increase desire beyond what's natural.
Yeah, that's a key concept. Think about junk food. Food scientists optimize for bliss point the perfect combination of salt, sugar, fat that excites your brain. Or think about how clothing mannequins often have impossibly exaggerated features, or how photoshopped ads present an unattainable ideal of beauty.
Social media fits here too, right? Delivering more likes and praise in minutes than you could realistically get offline.
Absolutely. Online porn, video games, these are all, in a sense, supernormal stimuli. They exploit our ancient instincts by taking what is naturally attractive to us, food, social approval, sexual opportunity, and amplifying it. This can set our natural drives into overdrive, fueling excessive habits like overshopping, endless social media scrolling, unhealthy eating, because they trigger our desires much more intensely than real-world stimuli often do.
And dopamine plays a big role here, but maybe not in the way we typically think. It's not just about pleasure.
Right? For years, scientists thought dopamine was all about pleasure. But now we know it plays a central role in many neurological processes, including motivation, learning, memory, punishment, voluntary movement, and critically, anticipation. Dopamine is released not just when you experience pleasure, but maybe even more powerfully when you anticipate it.
So the wanting is key.
The wanting is absolutely key. The greater the anticipation of a reward, the greater the dopamine spike. And interestingly, your brain has far more neural circuitry allocated for wanting rewards than for actually liking them. The nucleus accumbens, a key part of the wanting system, is much larger than the brain centers associated with liking. Without that wanting, that desire, action simply stops. The anticipation of an experience can often feel better than actually getting it. Thinking about Christmas morning can be better than opening the gifts. Daydreaming about vacation can be more enjoyable than the vacation itself. It's often the chase that truly motivates us.
We're social animals too, aren't we? That brings us to the seductive pull of social norms. We want to fit in, bond with others, earn respect and approval.
It's one of our deepest human desires. Historically, being an outcast, being separated from the tribe, was basically a death sentence. Those who collaborated and bonded enjoyed increased safety, better mating opportunities, access to resources. This ancient preference to belong powerfully influences our modern behavior.
So we imitate others to fit in.
We do. We don't choose our earliest habits consciously. We often imitate them. We follow the unspoken script handed down by our friends, family, community, culture. These social norms are the invisible rules that guide our behavior each day. If you grow up in a family that rewards academic achievement, studying hard will seem attractive. If your colleagues all wear expensive suits, you'll feel an inclination to splurge on one too. Behaviors are attractive when they help us fit in, or sometimes when they help us stand out in a desirable way.
The source material mentions 3 specific groups we tend to imitate: the close, the many, and the powerful.
That's right. The close are our immediate circle, family, and friends. Their habits often rub off on us the most because of proximity and trust. The many refers to the behavior of the tribe, what most people are doing. We check Amazon or Yelp reviews because we want to imitate the best buying or eating habits, assuming there's wisdom in the crowd.
But that can backfire, right? Like that chimpanzee study.
Yeah, it can. The normal behavior of the tribe can often overpower the desired behavior of the individual, even if the tribe's way is less effective. That study found that if a chimp learns an effective way to crack nuts, but then joins a group that uses a less effective method, it will actually avoid using the superior method just to blend in. Humans are very similar. There's tremendous internal pressure not to stick out.
And finally, we imitate the powerful people with status and prestige.
Yes, we're drawn to behaviors that earn us respect, approval, and admiration. We want to be the person at the gym who can do impressive feats, or the musician everyone admires, because these things confer status. We often try to copy the behavior of successful people because we desire that success for ourselves. Many of our daily habits are just quiet imitations of people we admire.
This power of social norms really comes through in that story about smoking in Istanbul.
Yeah, it does. The author was with a group of Turkish friends, and he realized he was the only one who hadn't, at some point, smoked at least a pack a day. When he asked how they all started, the answer was universal. Friends. It always starts with your friends. One friend smokes, then you try it.
But many of them had quit. Using Alan Carr's book, what was the secret there? How did it break such a powerful social habit?
The book works by systematically reframing every single cue associated with smoking and giving it a new negative meaning. It tells you things like, you think you are quitting something valuable, but you're not quitting anything because cigarettes do absolutely nothing for you. Or, You think smoking helps you be social, but it doesn't. You can be social without poisoning yourself. Or, you think smoking relieves stress, but it doesn't. Smoking doesn't relieve your nerves, it actively destroys them.
Ah, so it attacks the attractiveness of the habit by changing your internal narrative, your emotional association with the cues.
Precisely. By the time you finish the book, the associations have flipped. Smoking seems like the most illogical, unattractive thing you could possibly do. Habits are ultimately all about these underlying associations. These associations determine whether we predict a habit will be rewarding or not. Our interpretation of a cue is what sparks the craving. Two people can look at the same cigarette. One feels an urge, the other feels repulsion. The prediction that precedes the action and the feeling the prediction generates is the real driver.
That makes total sense and leads us perfectly into the third law. Make it easy. We've made it obvious, we've made it attractive. Now how do we reduce the effort? A common pitfall here is getting stuck in motion instead of taking action, right?
Absolutely. Motion is planning, strategizing, learning, like brainstorming book ideas or researching the best workout program. It feels productive, but you're not actually doing the thing yet. Action is the behavior that delivers an outcome, actually writing the chapter, actually
Right.
doing the workout. We often get stuck in motion because it allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. As Voltaire said, the perfect is the enemy of the good.
So how do we get into action?
The key to mastering a habit is to start with repetition, not perfection. Just get the reps in. The more you repeat an action, the more you activate that particular neural circuit in your brain. It's that principle. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Like the London taxi drivers.
Exactly. They have to memorize this incredibly complex map of London streets, the knowledge. And studies show they actually develop an enlarged hippocampus, the brain region involved in spatial memory. Their brains physically adapt to the usage. Repetition, even if it's imperfect, literally reshapes your brain. It's a form of change.
And this ties into the law of least effort, doesn't it? Our basic human nature is to conserve energy.
It is. We naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work. Jared Diamond, in Guns, Germs, and Steel, makes that fascinating point about the continents. The east-west axis of Eurasia allowed agriculture to spread relatively easily because the climate zones were similar across latitudes. Compare that to the north-south axis of the Americas, where climates vary dramatically, making the spread of crops much harder. It required more effort. It's just easier to do one push-up than 100, right? The less energy a habit requires, the more likely it is to actually happen.
So a critical strategy then is to reduce friction. Optimize your environment and your processes to make the desired actions easier.
Yes. Think about Japanese manufacturing principles like lean production, which focused relentlessly on eliminating wasted effort, addition by subtraction. This didn't just save costs. It added customers and revenue because things worked more smoothly. Modern life is full of services designed to reduce friction. Meal kits reduce grocery shopping friction. Dating apps reduce the friction of social introductions. Ride-sharing apps reduce the friction of getting across town. Text messaging reduces the friction of making a phone call.
Companies are constantly trying to automate, eliminate, or simplify steps. Fewer form fields, fewer clicks, voice-activated speakers.
It's a never-ending quest to deliver the same result, or better, in an easier fashion. And you can apply this same thinking to your own life.
How? Through priming the environment for future use. Like that IT developer Oswald Knuckles and his resetting the room habit.
Exactly. When he finishes watching TV, he puts the remote back, arranges the pillows, folds the blanket. When he leaves his car, he throws away any trash. He even wipes down the toilet while his shower warms up. The point isn't just tidiness, it's preparing for the next action. When I walk into a room, everything is in its right place, he says. People think I work hard, but I'm actually really lazy. I'm just proactively lazy.
Proactively lazy, I love that. So it's about front-loading the effort.
Precisely. You do the work up front so the future action requires less willpower in the moment. Want to cook a healthy breakfast? Place the skillet on the stove, get out the oil, lay out the plates and utensils the night before. Want to exercise in the morning? Set out your workout clothes, shoes, water bottle, gym bag ahead of time. You're redesigning your life so the actions that matter most are also the actions that are easiest to do. You're reducing the friction at that crucial moment of decision.
This also connects to commitment devices. Using your good intentions now to lock in future behavior before temptation strikes. Like Victor Hugo locking away his clothes.
That's the classic extreme example. Facing an impossible deadline for The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he supposedly locked himself in his study, had his assistant hide all his clothes except for a large shawl, making it physically impossible for him to go outside. He literally removed the tempting option.
That's dedication.
Oh.
Or maybe desperation.
Maybe both. But the principle is sound. Nir Eyal uses an outlet timer to cut off his internet router at 10 p.m. sharp each night, forcing him offline and signaling bedtime. The author uses a strategy when eating out, asking the waiter to box up half his meal before it even comes to the table, because if he waits until the full plate is in front of him, he knows he'll likely eat it all. These devices make it harder to give in to immediate desires by removing the choice, or at least adding significant friction at the moment of temptation.
And the ultimate way to make things easy is automation, right? Setting things up once to run automatically.
Yes, technology can be amazing for this. Automatic savings plans, automatic bill pay, using software to unsubscribe from junk email, turning off notifications by default, deleting social media apps from your phone. Automation transforms behaviors that were once hard, annoying, and complex into ones that are easy, painless, and reliable.
But there's a potential downside here too, isn't there, when everything is too easy?
There is. When the effort required to act on your desires becomes effectively zero, you can find yourself just slipping into whatever impulse arises at the moment. We can jump from easy task to easy task checking email, scrolling social media, without making time for the more difficult but ultimately more rewarding work. The author admits he often gravitated towards social media during downtime simply because it was frictionless.
Right, which he addressed with that password reset strategy.
Yes, that was his commitment device combined with adding friction. For a year, his assistant would reset the passwords on all his social media accounts every Monday morning, logging him out on every device. He worked without those easy distractions all week. Then, on Friday afternoon, she'd send him the new passwords, giving him access for the weekend. Come Monday morning, she'd reset them again.
Wow. Did it work?
He said within the first week, he realized he didn't need to check social media nearly as often as he thought. It had just become the default because it was so easy. Once that bad habit became significantly harder, almost impossible without effort, he found he suddenly had the motivation and mental space to work on more meaningful tasks. When working for you, automation can make your good habits inevitable and your bad habits practically impossible.
That's a fantastic illustration of increasing friction for bad habits. Okay, we've covered making habits obvious, attractive, and easy, but how do we ensure we actually keep doing them, especially when the initial excitement fades? That brings us to the crucial fourth law: make it satisfying.
This is absolutely key for long-term adherence. The cardinal rule of behavior change is simple. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
But that's the core problem, isn't it, with delayed gratification? Our brains are kind of wired for immediate payoffs.
Exactly. Our brains evolved in an environment where immediate returns were paramount for survival. You needed food now, shelter now. Long-term planning wasn't always the priority. This creates a mismatch in modern lives. With bad habits, the immediate outcome usually feels good, like the pleasure of smoking or eating junk food. But the ultimate outcome feels bad: health problems. With good habits, it's often the reverse. The immediate outcome is often unenjoyable, the effort of exercise, of discomfort of saving money, but the ultimate outcome feels good.
Like that Frederick Bastiat principle, what is seen and what is not seen. The immediate reward of the bad habit is seen, while the long-term cost is unseen or at least ignored.
Precisely. The immediate costs of good habits are felt in the present, while the rewards are often delayed. Conversely, the immediate rewards of bad habits are in the present, while the costs are delayed. Our evolutionary wiring biases us towards the immediate gratification of the bad habit.
So how do we hack this? How do we work with our nature, not against it, especially for those important long-term good habits?
The trick is to add a little bit of immediate pleasure or satisfaction to the habits that pay off in the long run. Give yourself an immediate reward when you complete the habit.
Like the Karachi hand-washing study, with the nice soap.
Exactly. Stephen Luby's study in Karachi, where illness was rampant. People knew hand-washing was important, but consistency was low. Luby and his team partnered with Procter & Gamble to supply Safeguard soap, a premium soap that foamed easily and smelled great. Suddenly, the act of hand-washing became slightly more enjoyable because of those immediate positive sensory signals.
It wasn't just about health education. It was about making the process itself nicer.
Right. Luby saw his goal as habit adoption, which is much easier for products or behaviors that provide immediate, satisfying feedback. Think about the minty taste of toothpaste or the lather of a good soap. Within months, the health of children in the neighborhoods using Safeguard improved significantly, largely because hand washing became something people actually liked doing, or at least didn't mind.
So find ways to make the process itself satisfying. You could even create little loyalty programs for yourself, couldn't you?
Absolutely. Label a savings account something fun, like European Vacation Fund or New Gadget Fund. Then, whenever you skip an unnecessary purchase or maybe eat at home instead of out, immediately transfer the money you saved into that account. The immediate reward of seeing that fund grow feels much better than just feeling deprived, and it's a tangible, satisfying vote for your desired future self.
And the key here is that the immediate reward should reinforce your desired identity, right? Not conflict with it.
Crucial point. Rewarding yourself with a bubble bath or an hour of guilt-free relaxation after a tough workout reinforces your identity as someone who takes care of themselves. Rewarding yourself with a giant bowl of ice cream casts conflicting votes. It might feel good momentarily, but undermines the larger goal. The immediate pleasure of simply recording your progress, like putting an X on the calendar or seeing your savings balance increase, can provide that necessary immediate gratification to enjoy a habit and make it stick.
Okay, so that's adding immediate pleasure to good habits. What about the flip side? Adding immediate pain to bad habits. This is where accountability comes in.
Yes, pain is a surprisingly effective teacher. Remember Roger Fisher's provocative idea about nuclear launch codes?
The one with the volunteer and the butcher knife? Yeah, that was intense.
Intense, but it illustrates the principle perfectly. His idea was to implant the nuclear launch codes near the heart of a volunteer who would always carry a butcher knife. To launch the missiles, the president would first have to personally kill this innocent person. It makes the abstract consequences of a monumental decision horrifyingly immediate and personal.
Okay, maybe we don't need butcher knives for our habits.
Probably not. But the underlying principle holds. The more immediate and costly a mistake or a slip-up feels, the faster you learn to avoid it. This is why accountability partners work. Knowing someone else is watching, maybe checking your workout log or asking about your writing progress, provides a powerful motivator because there's an immediate social cost to slacking off. You fear being seen as lazy, unreliable, or untrustworthy.
Like Margaret Cho's Joke-A-Day challenge with her friend, or Thomas Frank's system where Buffer would automatically tweet or donate money if he failed to wake up on time.
Exactly. These systems create immediate, often public or financial consequences for failing to follow through.
And this leads naturally to habit contracts, formalizing the accountability.
Yes. Brian Harris, an entrepreneur, used a very detailed diet contract to lose weight. If he failed to log his food or weigh himself daily, he had to adhere to strict consequences. Dressing up in a suit and tie every single workday and Sunday for the rest of the quarter, A&D paying his trainer $200. He, his wife, and his trainer all signed it.
Wow. That makes the cost of slipping up very real, very public, and very painful.
Exactly. Public and painful consequences can be remarkably effective motivators.
Finally, under the fourth law, let's talk about habit tracking. Seems simple, but effective.
It's surprisingly powerful for a few reasons. It's basically just a simple way to measure if you actually did a habit, like marking an X on a calendar, using a habit tracking app, or even just moving paper clips from one jar to another.
What makes it work so well?
First, it creates an obvious visual cue that reminds you to act. Second, it's inherently motivating because you see the progress you're making, that chain of X's building up, and you don't want to break the chain. Third, it feels satisfying. There's a little hit of immediate pleasure in recording your success, ticking that box. And importantly, it provides clear visual proof that you're casting votes for your desired identity. You can literally see the evidence of your new identity accumulating.
But what happens when life gets in the way? No habit streak lasts forever, right? Perfection isn't realistic.
Absolutely not. And trying for perfection is often counterproductive. The key rule here is incredibly important. Never miss twice. If you miss one day for whatever reason, the priority is just to get back on track as quickly as possible. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is a sort of a new, unwanted habit.
So the problem isn't the first slip up.
No. The real problem is often the spiral that follows. It's thinking, oh, I blew it. I might as well give up for the week. Or if I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. That all or nothing cycle is deadly for habits. Just showing up, even if it's only for 5 minutes, even if it's a bad workout or you only write one sentence, is infinitely better than doing nothing. It reaffirms your identity. You're still the type of person who doesn't miss workouts, even if today's was short.
And one last point on tracking. Beware of measuring the wrong thing.
Yes, definitely. Sometimes the most obvious metric isn't the most motivating one. For weight loss, for example, the number on the scale can be frustratingly slow to change. Focusing instead on non-scale victories, like Having more energy, your skin looking better, clothes fitting looser, feeling stronger, having a higher sex drive can often provide more frequent and satisfying signals of progress. If you're not feeling motivated by the primary measurement, maybe it's time to track something else, something that gives you more immediate feedback and satisfaction.
Okay, we've covered the four laws in detail. Now let's get into some advanced tactics for pushing beyond just forming habits into, well, true mastery and lifelong motivation. Let's start with the interplay of talent and genes.
Right. This is an interesting one. Think about Michael Phelps, the swimmer, versus Hookham El Garouge, the distance runner. Phelps is 6'4" labor with his incredible 6'7" wingspan and relatively short legs, almost perfectly built for swimming. El Garouge is 5'9", very light, ideal for distance running. They both reach the absolute pinnacle of their sports, but their physical gifts are vastly different and perfectly suited to their respective domains.
So genes matter. Talent isn't just a myth.
Genes absolutely matter. The truth is, genes don't determine your destiny entirely, but they definitely determine your areas of opportunity. As the physician Gabor Mate puts it, genes can predispose, but they don't predetermine. The areas where you are genetically predisposed to excel are often the areas where habits will feel more satisfying, simply because you'll likely see progress more quickly and things might come a bit easier.
So the key is to align your ambition with your natural ability. Play a game where the odds are more in your favor.
Exactly. Focus your effort where you're naturally suited. It makes the whole process, including the fourth law of making it satisfying, much easier. Your personality traits, too, like those described in the Big Five model, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, are influenced by your genes and can predispose you towards certain types of habits or environments being more suitable for you.
Okay, but how do you figure out where the odds are in your favor? How do you identify the opportunities and habits that are genuinely right for you?
Well, the first step goes back to the third law. Make it easy. Often when people pick the wrong habit, it's simply because it's way too difficult for them at the start. But beyond that, you need to explore to ensure you're playing the right game for your specific skill set.
Explore.
The most common approach is just trial and error, but life's kind of short for endless trial and error. A more strategic approach is what's called the explore-exploit trade-off. When you're starting out in a new activity or field, there should be a period of broad exploration. Think about dating lots of people before settling down, or maybe a liberal arts education before specializing. You try out many possibilities, cast a wide net.
And then?
After that initial exploration period, once you've found something that seems to fit, something that yields better results or feels more engaging, you shift your focus. You double down on that best solution found so far and exploit it. You refine, improve, deepen your skill in that area.
How do you know what to exploit, though? How do you recognize that just right fit for you?
One way is to pay attention to your feelings. Ask yourself questions like, what feels like fun to me but looks like work to others? Or, when have I felt most alive? When have I felt most like the real me? Look for those activities where you feel deeply engaged, where time seems to fly, where you feel authentic and genuinely enjoy the process itself without constantly judging yourself or trying to please others. When you feel truly authentic and intrinsically motivated, you're likely heading in the right direction.
Some of it is luck, too, though, right? Being in the right place, right time.
Absolutely. Phelps and El Garouge were lucky to be born with rare abilities that society happened to value, and lucky to be placed in environments where those talents could be nurtured. But, and this is important, if you can't find a game when the odds are already stacked in your favor, you can try to create one. By combining your skills in unique ways. This reduces the competition, making it easier to stand out. The author mentions designing his own major in college biomechanics, combining physics, chemistry, biology, anatomy. He felt he wasn't smart enough to excel in any single one of those fields against the specialists, so he created a new game at their intersection, one that favored his unique combination of strengths. The advice is, work hard on the things that come easy to you. Don't just dismiss other success as pure luck if you haven't put in the work to find your ideal arena where your natural inclinations give you an edge. Genes don't make you successful, but they can clarify where to focus your hard work.
Okay, so you found your game. How do you stay motivated over the long haul, especially when things get tough or maybe even worse, boring? That brings us to the Goldilocks rule.
Yes. Think about Steve Martin's journey to becoming a famous comedian. It wasn't overnight. It took him nearly 15 years of performing stand-up, often in small, half-empty clubs. He kept working on his routine, gradually expanding it by just a minute or two each year. He was constantly adding new material, the challenge, but always kept a few jokes that were guaranteed laughs, the victories. He had just enough wins to stay motivated and just enough mistakes or challenges to keep him working hard.
So the Goldilocks rule is about finding that sweet spot. Not too hard, not too easy.
Exactly. It states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, where you get frustrated and give up. Not too easy, where you get bored. Just right. It aligns with the Yerkes-Dodson law in psychology, which suggests optimal performance occurs at a moderate level of arousal, the midpoint between boredom and anxiety. When you're starting a new habit, it's crucial to keep it easy, third law, to build momentum.
Yeah.
But for long-term engagement and mastery, you need tasks that stretch you just a little bit.
And the biggest threat here isn't failure necessarily, but boredom.
Surprisingly, yes. As habits become automatic and routine, they inevitably become less interesting and less satisfying on a moment-to-moment basis. Everyone faces this challenge on the path to self-improvement. Things get repetitive. The initial excitement fades.
So what's the secret of the pros? How do they push through that?
They handle the boredom. They show up and do the work even when they don't feel like it. They stick to the schedule. They put in the reps day after day, even when it's monotonous. As one elite coach told the author, what really differentiates the best athletes isn't necessarily talent alone. It's that at some point it comes down to who can handle the boredom of training every day, doing the same lifts over and over and over. You almost have to fall in love with the boredom or at least tolerate it exceptionally well. Professionals stick to the schedule. Amateurs let life get in the way because the mood isn't right or the novelty is worn off.
That relentless consistency. Okay, but this leads to the potential downside of habits, right? If they become too automatic, too mindless.
Exactly. There's an efficiency paradox. Habits allow for mindless repetition, which is great for conserving energy. But the downside is that you become less sensitive to feedback. You stop paying close attention. Over time, this can lead to small errors creeping in or a slight decline in performance because you're not actively seeking improvement anymore. When you can do something good enough on autopilot, you often stop thinking about how to do it better.
Which is fine for simple things like brushing your teeth, maybe, but not for mastery.
Not for mastery or high performance, no. For that, you need more than just automatic habits. Habits are necessary, but they're not sufficient on their own.
So what's the missing piece?
You need a strategic combination of automatic habits plus deliberate practice. And a key part of that is regular reflection and review. You need to periodically step back and assess your performance, look for areas to improve, and make adjustments.
Like Pat Riley and the Lakers with their CBE scores.
Yes, exactly. Pat Riley, the legendary basketball coach, implemented this system called Career Best Effort, or CBE. After every game, players received a detailed statistical report card covering not just points and rebounds, but steals, turnovers, and even subjective unsung hero contributions. Each player was challenged to improve their CBE score by at least 1% over the course of the season, compared to their own past performance and league opponents. It kept them focused on continuous, incremental improvement, even at the highest level.
Or Chris Rock testing jokes.
Right. He doesn't just write a new hour of comedy and perform it. He goes to small clubs night after night, testing out tiny bits of new material, taking meticulous notes on what gets laughs, what falls flat, constantly tweaking and refining based on immediate audience feedback. Executives and investors often use decision journals, recording major decisions, their reasoning, expected outcomes, and then reviewing them months or years later to see where their thinking was sound or flawed. Improvement requires this ongoing cycle of performance, feedback, reflection, and fine-tuning, even when the basic habits are automatic.
Okay, finally, let's touch on the ultimate evolution of identity and the powerful role of emotion in all of this. The author talks about experiencing a significant loss of identity after his baseball career ended. That seems common for athletes, veterans, retired CEOs.
It's very common. Your role becomes intertwined with your sense of self. The key to mitigating these kinds of identity crises is to redefine yourself in a more flexible, less role-dependent way. You need an identity that can endure changes in circumstances.
Oh, you do that.
Instead of rigidly defining yourself as, I'm an athlete, maybe it becomes, I'm the type of person who is mentally tough and loves a physical challenge. Instead of, I'm a great soldier, perhaps it's, I'm the type of person who is disciplined, reliable, and great on a team. This allows important aspects of your identity to persist, even if your specific role, athlete, soldier, CEO, changes. It makes your identity more resilient, more adaptable.
Like that quote from the Tao Te Ching.
Yes, Lao Tzu wrote something like, the best athlete has no need of a medal, the best of artists has no need of praise, the best of sages, has no need of fame. Their satisfaction and identity are internal, not solely dependent on external validation or a specific title.
And underpinning all of this habit formation and identity shifting is the profound impact of our emotions, isn't it? It's not just logic driving us.
Not at all. Emotion compels action much more strongly than logic alone. Craving, as we discussed, is fundamentally a feeling, a desire, and it comes before the response. There are studies of people with brain damage affecting their emotional centers. They can often list perfectly logical reasons why they should take a certain action, but they still won't act because they lack the underlying emotional drive. We often need to feel something first before we act rationally.
And maybe suffering or at least dissatisfaction is necessary for progress.
In a way, yes. The desire for a change in state, the fundamental definition of a craving, is the source of almost all progress. We feel dissatisfied with our current state, and that feeling motivates us to seek something different, something better. Wanting more is what pushes humanity forward. With craving, we might be dissatisfied, but we're driven. Without craving, we might be satisfied, but we often lack ambition.
Which brings us back to that idea of satisfaction, liking, wanting.
Exactly. It helps explain why we often seem perpetually unsatisfied. Our wanting often outpaces our liking. Seneca hit on this centuries ago. Being poor is not having too little, it is wanting more. If your desires constantly escalate as soon as you achieve something, you'll always feel like you're falling short. Happiness is often relative to our expectations.
The author's example of celebrating 1,000 email subscribers a month, but later feeling almost nothing when gaining 1,000 a day.
Right. What was once a massive achievement became the new normal, the new baseline. The pleasure faded. The pain of failure often correlates directly to the height of our expectation. So it comes back to that loop. Cue triggers a craving, a feeling, which leads to a response, which results in a reward, another feeling satisfaction, relief. Desire initiates the behavior, pleasure and satisfaction sustain it over time. Feelings are crucial at both the beginning and the end of the loop.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. To recap our deep dive into atomic habits, we've really seen the astonishing compounding power of making tiny, seemingly insignificant changes. We've explored why focusing on robust systems, the processes, is often far more effective than just chasing fleeting goals.
And the profound impact of shaping your identity, focusing on who you want to become, and letting your actions cast votes for that identity.
We broke down that fundamental four-step habit loop cue: craving, response, reward, understanding how habits actually form and operate, often beneath our conscious awareness.
And then we dove into the practical application through the 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Each law gives us concrete strategies to engineer our environment and our mindset to build good habits and break bad ones.
From implementation intentions and habit stacking, to temptation bundling and resetting the room, to the Goldilocks rule and the crucial mantra of never miss twice.
It's a really comprehensive framework. So, as you, our listener, move forward thinking about your own habits, here's a final thought to consider, building on everything we discussed.
Okay, let's hear it.
Consider how your internal interpretation, your feeling about a task you find difficult or boring, might be subtly influencing your ability to actually stick with it. We talked about making habits satisfying after you do them. But what if you could consciously work to shift your feelings, your associations, before taking action?
Changing the feeling first.
Yeah. Think about that distinction between wanting and liking and the power of anticipation. Could you reframe your internal narrative about the process itself, finding ways to make the anticipation, the wanting, more appealing, even for tasks that seem inherently tedious? It's about challenging yourself to design your motivation not just through external rewards, but from the inside out, by shaping not just what you do, but how you genuinely feel about doing it.